Well, friends, welcome back to the Making Spaces podcast. I am one of your hosts, Sarah Heath, and this is the other co-host,
Josie Jimenez.
And today, Josie is excited to share with us our guest. Josie, will you introduce?
Yes, Mom. I always say yes, Mom, because she likes to tell me what to do. It's funny. It's fun. Today with us, we have the incredible Brenda Marie Davies, aka God is Gray, if you want to check her out on Instagram. She is a YouTuber and podcaster who is championing sex-positive, intellectual, affirming faith, which is all the things I love in life. Thanks for coming on, Brenda.
Thank you for having me.
Well, we love to start just by kind of doing what we kind of call the lob question, an easy peasy question that lets you know a lot about people. Our question is this. So we're a podcast about making spaces for people both literally and figuratively. And so we love to ask the question, what is one of your favorite spaces and why?
Okay. This is like, I don't know, whatever you think of me, fine. I really miss nightlife. I am a major social butterfly. I just posted, all the Bernie memes going around. There's a Bernie meme of him sitting outside of Berghain in Berlin. Do you know that spot?
Yes, yeah.
And actually, my memoir coming out on her knees, the final chapter ends at Berghain. So there's something very spiritual and worshipy. I think it kind of replaces that space I used to have in church where you just get to dance unabashedly and just be in your joy and your happiness without being judged. I think it's kind of what church was meant to be and what it used to be for me. And then replacing that with all of these other beautiful, inclusive, amazing spaces, which Berghain is like one of those ultimate kind of ones. I miss that. That was my church. That was my moment to like be around everyone that I love.
We actually just had this long conversation with some space that they found to be that kind of holy ground or holy space was at concerts, which I can 100% relate to. Concert for me can be a bit of a holy experience, but usually if it's like a band where you are dancing and you're moving your body and you're feeling that like energy of the crowd, I'm saying all these things about to make myself cry. Guys, we have got to get out of this. Just get a shot, idiots. Like enough is
Oh my gosh, all of these things are my literal worst nightmare. I don't like people touching me. I don't like staying up late. I go to sleep at 9 p.m.
Oh my gosh. Wow. So have you been thriving in quarantine? This is like
truly, I really have been. It's pretty embarrassing because I'm 25 years old. I should be in the middle of my prime young adult years, and I prefer to not. I don't.
But you've also taken up like grandma hobbies, so you're like living into it. I love it.
Yeah, all these pillows are crocheted covers by me.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. No judgment. That's thriving at 25. Whatever it means to you.
Exactly. Yeah. I tried though. I really tried. Sorry, Dad. I tried to be a nightlife person. I tried to go to clubs, and I would see somebody pop in some type of pill. I'm like, you need Jesus. Get away from me. I'm not anti-drug, but kind of.
Are you now claiming you're anti-drug?
That I'm not anti-drug. I said
I was going to say, yeah, you're not anti-drug, but keep going. Go ahead. You had a question.
You used to be.
Okay. Yeah, I eat a lot of weed. Anyways, just FYI, everybody. And I would love to hear like the elevator short pitch of how you got to be this super cool advocate with a huge platform, in my opinion.
Yeah, just go ahead, jump right to it. How did you start YouTubing about sexuality in the church? I mean, just go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's really funny because I'm a millennial. I moved to LA with dreams of like movie stardom and stuff. So if you would have told me you're going to be a YouTuber, I would have been humiliated. I just didn't think that. I did not think that was a real thing. But like it used to be really pigeonholed. It's like if you came here to do one thing, you had to stick to that one thing. And I love
Yeah.
how much that has expanded and grown. And I also feel blessed because all of a sudden every single person is a YouTuber. Like Trevor Noah is now a YouTuber out of necessity.
Why would you
So
mention my boyfriend? Okay, we can
okay,
go back.
well, clearly he's in an open relationship because he's also mine.
I would share him
Hey.
with you. I feel that good about you. I would totally share him.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so I feel like it's brought a lot of validation to the space. And also the younger generation, like 25-year-olds, thinks it's very valid. So anyway, all I'm saying is I actually did not set out to do this. I wrote a book and I was trying to get it published. And the response I was getting, by the way, this is pre-Trump. So, that's a lot of lack of understanding about like Christian nationalism and the power of evangelicalism. I think a lot of people, especially in mainstream Hollywood, didn't understand how important all these topics were. So the response I got was, "We love this material, but there's no audience for it." And I was like, "Yes, there is. Even if there's
Oh,
me and 20 girls, like there's
Mhm.
there's people out there that relate to this." But I didn't hear anyone speaking about it yet. So I just had a very, very strong sense that I wasn't alone. So I'm shopping it around, and then one day I fell into one of those beautiful trances. I hate this lingo that you use in evangelicalism where you get a divine download, but I truly detest that, but I know people still use it. And that's what happens. It's like I just blacked out and wrote down 40 topics. Like if I could speak to this issue, what would I talk about? And the reason I felt compelled even to think about YouTube is because I went to YouTube looking for inclusive spaces. I was like, surely I've been out of church for like over 7 years. There's got to be affirming churches. There's got to be sex positive Christian voices. And I found Girl Defined and Paul Morgan and a lot of other young white sweethearts spouting some pretty terrible toxic theology. And I was like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe this space hasn't evolved since I left it. I was actually stunned. So then I just blacked out, wrote down 40 topics. I was sitting with my partner and I was like, I have an idea. And I picked up a camera. I was so nervous, but I also had this really beautiful vision. I know this isn't the abridged version, but it's just what it is. I felt like if I were to just step out into this space, I saw like a square field. And I really felt God was like, if you just step into this space, you'll be out there for alone. You'll be scared. You'll be freaked out. But soon enough, I saw this like brunette woman come out of this like really dense forest and step into this really clear field with me. And then more people started stepping out of this forest into this field with me. We were all waving at each other. And I took that vision to me. And as soon as you step out in this boldness, which I always heard in evangelicalism, that you will have community, that you will find people out there. The first person waving to me from that field was Linda K. Klein. That was the first person I discovered that I was like, oh my God, someone else is saying the same thing that I am desperate to say. And then from there, it was floodgates, like Pete Enns, Nadia Bowles-Weber, and Kevin Garcia, and Grace Baldridge, and all these other phenomenal voices. We're all in this field together, and we're all just inviting more and more people to step out into this beautiful, vast space with us and do this discovery together.
I think that's it, right? When you're in that field, it often, I think, because you're looking to the field you just left, you haven't looked around and seen who's standing with you. I think often there's this sense of, I am so alone. A lot of the work that I do, deconstructed Christians or people who are stepping into affirming places for the first time, or stepping into inclusive spaces for the first time. And it's so interesting how they're like, there's so much here. I was told that once I started believing this way, there would be 0 people with me. And so I think that feels really loud, and it's really easy to get stuck staring at that one. But it is so incredible to see how once you make that space for yourself, like you said, it's the thing I wanted to say, but I think it's also the thing you needed to hear, and how often we don't want to attribute that to some sort of
Mm.
divine spark in ourselves. Like, why is this the thing that keeps coming up, and why is that? So thank you for stepping into that. What was the reaction to when you started just recording these things? What was the like? What I'm just so fascinated as I went back and looked at the breadth of some of your work. The comments are pretty spicy.
Oh yeah. I can tell you about comments and everything. I have a different perspective on that. But it was just really funny because I have been committed to just desperately wanting to be cool since I was in like elementary school. I wanted to be in the cool girl crowd and all this other stuff. And it's funny because I feel like I really devoted myself to that pursuit in LA for so many years. Like, who knows if it was ever achieved, but I have so many cool friends. And when I put up my first YouTube video, I remember two particular very cool people called me, and they were both like, "Oh my God, what are you doing?" They were like, "This is social suicide. Why don't you put someone else's face? Like, you're on YouTube, you old hag. Like, what are you doing?"
Guys, step into your dreams.
And so a lot of a lot of my fear was like, I stepped out of the Christian space that used to be my family. I created this brand new, very diverse, incredible family of artists and everything in LA. But then I was afraid to step back into the religious space and lose my family that I built. But of course, like we have all, I think, noticed a lot of times your quote non-Christian friends are so much more kinder, so much more forgiving and loving than, the people in that Christian space, because everyone actually very quickly embraced me. I think it took everyone a second. They were like, this woman has lost her mind. And then they were like, oh, okay, I see what she's doing. And it's beautiful because people have come out of the woodwork, people I would have never thought. And they're like, oh my God, I have an evangelical past. I thought I was by myself. So yeah, it was kind of, I think all these spaces that you step into, if you're like pioneering something, you're not going to be sure if there's a community there waiting for you. And that's just how I felt. It was like a second wave of, oh my God, I hope I don't lose my family again because I'm doing this, but it's all good.
It's so funny that people are like, "Oh, there's no demographic for this," because I went to a small Christian college. This is a Pacific University in Los Angeles County, California. Don't go there; they suck.
Whatever. You met some of the greatest people there.
I loved my experience, but not affirming and not cool in that sense. But I remember I was a friend, so I started. My first step to deconstruction was starting what I call my hoe phase, wherein I would have monogamous sexual partners that I wasn't in a relationship with.
That's your hoe phase. Okay.
Yeah, that was my hoe phase.
Because I had a real hoe phase. I called it my trampage.
Yep. I don't like people that much. That was always my
I think what you're learning
barrier.
Is like, this isn't like, that's too much.
Yeah. It's just the social interaction that I couldn't do that. But I had my hoe phase, and then my friends were like, oh, now I can ask Josie all the questions about sex ever, as if I was this new expert. Like these little Christian people were like, Josie, what, asking me all these questions? And I was like, I only know the vanilla sex that I have with these partners. That's all I know. But I mean, I was teaching people how to put in tampons because that was considered like
a whole different perspective. That's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah, I mean, it was hilarious.
Wow.
But that's because they were seeking this information, right? They have never been taught anything about sex their whole lives. So as soon as they see somebody step out into the hoe sphere, they can ask all these questions.
I'm just gonna forever call it the hoe sphere. I don't know where it is or what
I
it is.
love that.
It sounds like a good place.
Yeah.
A good time. I think there's something so powerful too about this idea of like the reality that there's something within us that just wants to belong. We just want to belong, right? And so church can fill that for a while. The LA scene, other than Josie, who of us haven't been in that scene a little bit. But when we don't integrate all pieces of us, we don't belong, right? So like pre-YouTube, you wasn't fully integrated, right? You had this past that you weren't talking about. By the way, like if I could tell you how many of, particularly my friends in the LGBTQIA community were like, when I had to come out as an ex-evangelical, it was as hard as coming out as a person who was gay. Because it's that fear, that moment of like, if I say the thing, what is the cost? Mm-hmm. If I admit my truth, what is the cost? And living as a non-integrated human, and in some ways I think about like even our separation from our bodies as women within the church, right? Like our flesh is bad, our mind, that sort of thing that we've lived with and so much, like there's this separation. And so integration is kind of what I feel like you talk about a lot, this idea of how do I integrate all these pieces of me until there is, and people that catches on, right? There is a reason why you have a very big audience, because there are so many people sitting around going, man, like, how do I integrate that? I don't think my body is something that I should abandon or leave. I mean, the number of former Christian women who deal with body issues like beyond, because our bodies were dangerous. I mean, my God, the number of like talks I've heard about tape or like Velcro or like, I don't know, comparing our bodies to
Object
product.
exercises.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm grateful for the work that you do and for you being willing to say, but it was also hard to tell my LA friends, hey, this is part of me too.
Mm-hmm.
Um, how do you nurture that part of you now? Where are you finding spaces and places that you are able to integrate your connection to the divine?
Ugh, I mean, it's so much fun now. Like, we've been given this narrative in evangelicalism, freedom in Christ, freedom in Christ, and then they shackle you. Really, they're
Mm-hmm.
like, you're free to be exactly who your evangelical youth pastor told you you're supposed to be. And that is not freedom. And also, when you live with that inauthenticity, exactly what you're talking about, Sarah, it's like, you're not embodied, you're not living as your whole self. Kevin Garcia talks about it in their book too, where they're like really beautifully articulating. The book is called Bad Theology Kills.
Now
r-
available in Spanish, they told me yesterday.
oh, that's
Yes.
amazing. Good. Oh my goodness. But when they're talking about just how truly, deeply, profoundly painful it is to not be seen fully, because all of us want to be actually truly loved. So when you're withholding pieces of yourself, if you're forcing yourself to be a housewife when you knew you were always made to have a career or vice versa, it's like it's excruciating. So one of the most important things I did with embodiment was align my sexuality and my spirituality. And I wrote a lot about this in my book as well, because my Achilles heel has definitely always been sex. Sex is something that I love. I love it in great amounts. I love it with many different people. And I look back on old journals of mine from childhood or from like evangelicalism, let's say 12 and above. And I'm like, I've just always dreamed of being with one person and living happily ever after. And when I was unpacking that, I was like, remembering that when I was actually 11, right before I got, quote, saved into this horrible, toxic sexual ethic, I used to lay in bed and fantasize that I was kissing the cutest boy in school, Steve Urbanski. And then
Shout
he
out
would
to
move,
Steve.
shout out Steve. And he would move aside, and then there would be a guy behind him, and I'd kiss him, and then he'd move aside, and I was like, wow, that was actually what I wanted. I take that as healthy or not, but it was like realizing and coming to terms with like what I actually had desired, what my actual thoughts were before my whole sexual ethic got hijacked by the church. And my whole thing now is that you're allowed to have these desires because you really can't control your desire. It's just a part of who you are. But you absolutely can figure out a holistic, healthy, um integral way to just like make that a part of yourself, and to do it with the utmost respect and concern for both your body, your spirit, your mind, and also your partner's body and spirit and mind. And you can have a desire like that to kiss a million boys, but to also abstain because you know what you want. But the point is, when you get to let go of that entire false ethic and narrative about what you're supposed to be, then it gives you the opportunity to actually become fully you. So my very first step was realizing, okay, when I got a divorce, because that's a part of my story, I was a perfect girl. I got a divorce and my pendulum broke, swung to the other side. I went from modesty and purity culture to hookup culture. And I always use hookup culture with a negative term. That's just the way I see it. I see it as like abuse and misuse of bodies and not really fully being aligned with like who you are and what you want sexually. I want everyone to be in the middle. I want myself to be in the middle where you're just swinging back and forth, where you're experimenting, where you're free to be yourself and you're just like moving in this really healthy way, just centered. And that really began for me on this journey when I read Linda K. Klein's book, and she mentioned something about like God standing outside of the bedroom. And then she finally said, "Come in here. I'm going to do this act. I'm going to have sex, but I want you a part of it." Because for a long time, I'd written in my journal, like, to have sex, I must abandon God. To have God, I must abandon sex. They were always separate. So I took a cue from her and I was about to hook up with an idiot. But and I everything inside of me was like, this guy's gonna be an idiot. He's gonna leave you on red. He's a dummy. And I was like, okay, but you know what? I'm here. I already know I'm gonna do it. So for the very first time, God, get in here. I want you to be a part of this experience. And I will say I never did anything like that again because then it was a fully me present. And I realized, oh, I shouldn't have not done that because it's a sin and I'll burn in hell. I should have not done that because when I'm truly aligned with my spirit, I knew it wasn't going to honor me. I knew it wasn't going to bring me joy and fulfillment and peace. And that is what I deserve. And that's what I want for myself because I can't live in these rules and restrictions. They have to come from within. Like I so often say, you cannot build a sexual ethic on fear. You can't build anything on a foundation of fear.
No
But
ethic.
yeah, that's not real. That's why so many pastors, quote, fall. That's why the church in Catholicism and beyond, I mean, every church is having these massive sexual scandals. You cannot give people a list of rules about their sexuality. They have to fully understand why they are doing what they're doing and actually believe it and want it for themselves.
Yeah, it's this you know, a the thing that pains me the most is fear as far as dealing with people and helping them integrate all these things. And it's what hurts most is this idea of this all loving God. And then, so you should just be afraid of that all loving God.
Yeah.
And not only that, but like your ideas about that all loving God are scary. And therefore, your ideas should be feared. And then
Mhm.
also, and it's just like this, all this fear is built up in people. And then you do see this pendulum, right? You see this like, okay, well, if nothing is okay, then everything is okay. It's like this thing that people have to go through. And I realize it's part of, for some people, it's part of the process, right? Of coming to like the middle. I had a professor in grad school who like used to say really far out things because he wanted to get us here. So he'd like say theology. Stanley Hauerwas. By the way, if you ever want to see someone cuss with like extreme skill, Dr. Stanley Hauerwas. He was great. First day of class, we walk in, he's like, I just want you to know that everything you say is shit. And we were like, great, perfect. He's like, you didn't, you know, everyone else is going to tell you, I'm going to teach you how to think. I don't care how you think. You pay me to hear how I think. And we were all like,
Dude,
okay.
that's Josie energy right there.
It's so much Josie energy.
That's so funny.
So much Josie energy. Yeah, but I think, and he would take us to these places where you go, I don't know that I can go there with you, but I can go here with you. And I think our own bodies and minds do that. And I think the more and more we lead with fear, the more and more we're not sure ourselves. The number of leaders who have to be so strict about, I mean, we're seeing with this and I can never remember his name, and so I am so sorry, this is the crass way to remember this guy, Justin Bieber's pastor, who has like, I could
Carl Lentz.
thank you, I could identify that man's junk, you know, like if there was a
Nope.
lineup just from photos, like that
Yeah.
dude, he, I mean, so much information. um he, but I think he is a victim of this, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, but it's in me, but it's in me, but it's in me. And
Mhm.
so then it doesn't go away, it just gets darker, right? What's of the light is light. So when we tell the truth, when we're honest, when we're open, you know, Kevin, they are great. Kevin always says to me, just say what you want. And I'm,
Mm.
but I have this practice of just being honest with myself, allows me to be honest with the world. And you know, the truth is people really never accepted you because they didn't know you, right? And so all this fear, all this stuff, it's all fake and phony. And I hate to say it, but those who are yelling the loudest are usually the freakiest and like have the darkest stuff going on. And they're just yelling so that no one will listen, like pay attention to their own lives. I mean, I'll never forget one of my favorite moments was at a party with someone who, Mark Driscoll, who was this pastor who just, the way he talked about women was disturbing. I mean, one of the things he actually said is one of the problems with marriage is we need more blowjobs. And which, sure, if that's your thing. But then my friend who had not decided to work with him as a publisher had actually fired Mark as a client. We were sitting talking and someone else was like, I just got to think this guy has a freaky sex life. And we all started thinking about it. We're like, yeah, he does. He's got to, because why would you talk so much about something unless it was something that you needed to get out and process? I think you're asking great questions so people start asking them of themselves, but also of the leaders, like the people. And it's not a, shame and blame of like, hey, you fell into it. It's like a, hey, I've been there. That was part of my story. Here's where I've ended up.
Yeah. I know I heard someone just recently say that researchers are just selfish people because they're just always going to research what they need and then output that to the world, which that's what it is. Like all of my research is like obsession with sex. And it's like, well, yeah, that's my obsession. That's what I'm really into. But yeah, to your point, like that's why hate comments don't bother me, because my friend Alexis Gisal, we did a little YouTube video together, and I just showed her Christian cringe because she's totally on the outside of it. She's queer, fully at peace, never had the baggage that we did. And she was like, if you're yelling about gay sex, don't you think you want gay sex? And I thought about it and I was like, yeah, I mean, I've never yelled at the top of my lungs about gay sex. I've never been on boards screaming about people, like how it has, but I've done it in different areas that are important to me. So I tend to agree with you.
Yeah,
My
it's
mother
funny.
always says, methinks thou does protest too much. Anytime, I grew up Canadian, until we moved. I'm still Canadian, but I was 14 when we moved to the States, and we moved to the South. So I moved from Canada to Mississippi. So cultural, like, what the hell? But one of the things that was I'd be like, Mom, why are they so obsessed with drinking and sex? And my mom was like, methinks thou does protest too much. And she would also pick on us if we would talk about a house, like, oh, that boy is so dumb. My mom would just look at us like, right?
Yeah.
Truth is the thing that where our mind goes, our energy goes, where our heart goes, like where we gotta, I think, sometimes question the things that we're scandalized by and ask, like, why does that matter? Why is it so important to me that I try to control other people's way of living? Like, what is that in us? Is it that I want health and healing and wholeness for them? And then is it about questions instead about fear? I think I have never been able to convince people of anything by me setting out rules. And if I have, it's been for a short amount of time. But when we invite people into, like, maybe there's a bigger narrative, I think people are more apt to come. Like you said, the pendulum swings, and sometimes it's just like a wrecking ball, and you just got to let people come through, do their thing, and wait. And that's, I think, one of the gifts of age for me, is being able to see, like, some of the people that were loudest are now the ones who have come back and been like, hey, remember how, like, the way you thought scared me? I'm there now. Can you help me get there? Or can you help me understand how you got there? It's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, and that's why I never want to vilify anyone that's going through it, because I
No.
was doing anti-abortion artwork in high school. I was arguing with my biology teacher about a 6-day Earth. I was praying on the front lawn of my school. So if I were to get mad at people now for doing the same thing, that would be very hypocritical. For me, I just see really impassioned people that really do wholeheartedly want something good, that they just need to break free of the toxic theology.
Yeah. I mean, there is a sense that they're, like I said, as much a victim of exactly what you're saying, the thing that they're yelling about. We very early on, actually, Josie, you weren't on the podcast yet, but I interviewed one of my dearest friends who's a designer. Guys, the way he designs a room, it's unbelievable. But Riley grew up in a very conservative Texan Christian. Riley's very good looking, tall, very gay. Like, and he lived such a repressed life for so long. He's like, Sarah, I performed an anti-abortion rap that I would, and I just was trying to fit in so bad. Actually worked for Saddleback for a while, like tried so hard. And I find that people like Riley have this compassion and almost nostalgia for folks, and real empathy that we have to learn how to have when we can say, oh man, I've been there. I get it. I get where you're coming from. I'm not there, but man, that seems like it's a difficult place to be.
Yeah.
And when I'm my best self, that's my reaction to critique. When I'm my worst self, then I'm Josie. I'm just kidding, Josie. You're not my
Oh, I'm aggressive. The other day, Sarah and I had a Facebook interaction with somebody who was trying to attack me because they said I like gay people, and they were this dude that I used to go to church with at a Baptist church. I started Pentecostal and then I swung Baptist because that wasn't my jam, and then that also wasn't my jam. And now Sarah's my pastor and my boss, which is funny. But so it was hilarious.
You're my boss. You may work for me, but you are my boss. Keep going.
Love it. But he kept coming after me, and I kept trying to place this boundary, saying like, hey dude, I know what you believe, you know what I believe, I'm not going to change your mind, and you're coming off real aggressive, so I'm not going to have this conversation. And he kept coming after me, and he then tried to go after Sarah, and then I tried to go after the guest that we had on the podcast. And his idea was, oh, well, you posted this podcast on the internet, so it's public consumption, and therefore you and your time are public consumption, which is this whole idea that I feel men in the church have around women, is that we are always for public consumption, whether they believe it or not, whether they say it or not, I guess I should say. They always think that women are for them, that women's sexuality is theirs. Virginity is important because it makes, like, it frames everything as like, you are a commodity that I am to consume, and if somebody else has consumed you, you're not worth my time or effort.
Oof.
And I
I
hate
mean,
that.
yeah. Yeah. I hear what you're saying. I've never met that guy. Like, that sounds like the ideology to me, or maybe what someone might present online. But I have so much compassion for men. And in this book by Peggy Ornstein, are you familiar with her work?
Mm-mm.
Oh, she's incredible. Highly recommend. A long time ago, I think about 12 years ago, she researched maybe 1,000 pre-adolescent and adolescent women and called it Girls and Sex. And she really blew the lid off a lot of different things about desire and sexual activity and that age range, and like all this research that no one had really done before. And in the preface to her new book, Boys and Sex, she admittedly says, I always saw men as the enemy. They were the reason women were in so much pain because of our patriarchal system, and especially in the church with all this horrible ideology that our virginity does belong to them, and we are commoditized in that way. And is that a word, commoditized? I'm not sure.
It is now.
Why am I acting like I would know? I just get paid to talk.
If it doesn't exist, I just coined it. We know what I'm talking about. But yeah, she was like, and then suddenly it hit her like a ton of bricks. Like, they may be the problem, but what are they going through? What is being perpetuated? What are they learning that is making them the problem? Can we get to the root, the rotten root of that, so that they stop hurting women and they stop hurting themselves? And it's heartbreaking to read this book because the scripts that men are given, there's even studies that show that infant boys actually display way more emotional receptiveness than infant girls. So this is what I talk about, like people reading the Bible upside down. And when we talk about the enemy, like Satan coming in to destroy things, to me, this is one of those most clear things. Whether or not you ascribe to the belief of Satan, I would call it the antagonist.
Yes.
Whatever it is, whatever force it is that is always out for us, that voice in our head that is like, you're a piece of garbage, you're supposed to do X, Y, and Z, or you're not loved by anyone, that exists daily in our heads. And I think it's fascinating, but it also plays off of all these scripts given, and men are given such rough scripts. And even she interviewed like 8-year-old boys that have been exposed to pornography, or 10-year-old boys, and they're like, I thought girls wanted flowers and they want you to be sweet, but do they want you to bang them against the wall and like spit on them because they seem to be enjoying that? Like, the amount of confusion that these poor sweethearts who used to have more emotional capacity than a lot of their female counterparts end up, under this repressive system that hurts them. And it's that old adage, hurt people hurt
Hurt people.
people. And until we heal both with a lot of the feminine energy, there's such a huge spiritual swing into the feminine right now. And it is crucial for the healing of the earth, for the healing of our environments, and for our emotional health. And I'm just excited we're all part of it. And I want to welcome men into that fold so much,
Yes.
because
Yes.
they need the healing so they can stop hurting us and stop hurting each other.
I think toxic masculinity has been harder on men in some ways, and that's the
Mhm.
to think that being for women is against men, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It is a false dichotomy. It is absolutely a false dichotomy, and to think that men who can embody a healthy sense of feminine energy, the jokes, and you know what's interesting is I've noticed the guys that like pick on the other guy for being a little bit sensitive, it's almost this sadness of why I can't, can we do that? Is that permissive?
Yeah.
Kids, when they joke, it's often because they're trying to create a boundary. So they make a
Mhm.
joke and then look around like, is this okay? Is this the boundary? How do I do this? That's why I love kids' humor so much, because they're like, uh, poop. Oh, they got a reaction, right? And I think men have been oftentimes just not allowed to cry.
Mm.
Now when a guy tells me, I mean, I used to think I bought into the whole Nicholas Sparks looking for the tough guy that never cried and has a tough background. Um, and then I did a pendulum swing to like, oh, you're writing in your journal in the corner at Starbucks and look like you're a little emotionally damaged. I'm in. Um, I think there is this sense of like, we have to stop acting like the tropes are true for all people.
Oh,
So how
amen.
you experience your emotion is how you experience your emotion is how you experience your emotion. And little guys that are sensitive are, it's great and beautiful and wonderful. And I've noticed, I've tried to start using language, because I read another book and I cannot remember about even the like language we use around babies. So for instance, this baby is strong when it's a boy. This baby is beautiful when it's a girl. And sort of even those messaging, like, oh, I need to be strong. And the opposite of strong is what, right? Um, I remember the first time I found out I was a little girl. True story. It's because in my neighborhood was mostly boys, and they would say like, you throw like a girl, when they were making fun of each other. And so we were playing Star Wars, and one of the little boys said, Sarah, you can't be Han, you have to be Princess Leia. And I said, why? And he said, because you're a girl. And I hit him and said, I'm not a girl, and started screaming. And then my mom had to pick up little Sarah, who's like fists like raging in
Oh.
the air. And my mom is like, oh no, because my parents tried so hard to like help us with like not gender conformity, and my mom's like, we probably should have told her that like being a girl is okay. Cause I was like, I am not a girl. I'm not a girl, which I was like super girly in so many like gender stereotyped girly ways. But I thought girl was such an offensive word. And in the same way, boys shouldn't be an offensive word. And like the idea that like just embody yourself, whatever that looks like. And I'm not going to define that for you, just as you shouldn't define it for me. And I think you're right. This toxic masculinity harms men as much as it harms women, and sexuality between and with, there's all these things that when we try to define life for other people get just really messy. And then people do rage at you. But you know what, Josie, being called what was it? He called me not a heretic.
A false prophet.
Oh, a
Oh,
false
I
prophet.
love that
It's a
one.
Monday. Like I'm like literally I was like, oh, it's Monday. I got called a false prophet again.
Yeah, exactly. It's good. It's a badge of honor.
Yeah. My friend always sends me that meme of why are you so obsessed with me? And that was actually he sent me that meme in relation to you, Josie. Why is that guy so obsessed with her? And I think it's true.
Wow.
It's sometimes freedom, when people see freedom, they want it so bad for themselves. They know nothing to do other than to react emotionally with it. And because we haven't taught people how to process our emotions in a way that doesn't affect other people, they just rage. It's the emotion
Yeah.
they know, that's the emotion they've been allowed to have. um, and it's sad. So now that we've fixed patriarchy, I would, just a standard day for you, really. I would love to hear if you had like one tip, because we're getting towards the end. If you one tip, one thing um, that you think people could do to make themselves like space for themselves or others in this area or any area you can think of, what's like one tangible way that people can make space for other people?
Oh, that's a really, really good question. Um, I guess what's coming to mind is throwing out all of our scripts, which is so hard. It's an arduous, long process. And I'm on my like 12th year of deconstruction, which I used to call my prodigal son journey because I didn't have the terminology deconstruction yet. And but a part of that to me, like one of the most significant brand new lessons that I learned in prayer and on this journey was to embrace the concept of non-binary. And I'm from Philly, so I have this like cynicism about all kinds of things. It's just kind of regionally baked into you. Like I remember like poo-pooing animal rights when I was like 8 years old or something, because all of the like women wanted to wear their fur coats in Philly or something. And then I look back and I was like, that's so funny. I just took that on like, yeah, animal activists, like screw them. So it's like we're given so many scripts, and one of mine was this cynicism. We're cynical about any sort of progressive ideas, or hippies are weird, or liberals, like all I grew up in that kind of vibe. And so when I heard non-binary, because I have a big Gen Z audience, I was annoyed. I really was. I was like, what the hell are you guys talking about now? Like it was the most major obstacle for me. I couldn't wrap my head around it. And I'd learned about so many other concepts that were admittedly brand new to me. Like I didn't know anything about trans rights or the prison industrial complex or all these different wonderful things that I have, so to speak, woken up to over these past 3 years or longer. And this was the new thing that I was like my little Gen Z girls, them, whoever, were like signing their emails with like they, them, or hit her, she. And I was just like, why are we doing this all of a sudden? This is ridiculous. All of that said, I just want to share the journey, like to say that I can be woke, but it's still a process. We're all in the process of waking up. Like I was asleep. I woke up and I wasn't liking what I was seeing when I was waking up. I wasn't getting it. And it really just came to me in prayer because I sat with it. And that's something that I devote myself to, that I would encourage everyone to. Like when something offends you or something is brought to your attention that just like stirs your spirit in some crazy way, it is likely not because it is wrong. It's more likely that it's right, and it's just assaulting your sensibility because it's just new and it's weird, and you just have to like get in there. So instead of bucking it and being like, screw them, I'm not going on this journey with them. Obviously, I can't do that. I got to go on the journey with my people. So I sat down in prayer, and like it was just so simple. God was like, "Well, I'm non-binary." And
Eee.
and I was like, oh, damn. Because I've known that for a while. I long ago had gotten rid of this idea that God was a guy with balls and a dick. Like that
Which
very
makes
clearly.
zero sense. That is like my favorite game to play, by the way, with particularly male guys who are like, well, why do you, I mean, he language, like, is it so hard because you're a leader? you don't have balls, blah blah. And I'm always like, why does God have sexual organs?
Yeah.
Like, what is God doing with those? Where are they? Like, and they're
Yeah.
always like, I've never thought of it that far.
Right. And it's so limiting, and especially because of the scripts that we're given. Like, if you have to call God your father and you have daddy issues, like maybe that's not only comfortable for you, but maybe that's just outright wrong for you. Maybe that's not the way you tap into divinity, because it
Mm,
doesn't work for you. We are all so different. We have such a vast and different group of experiences that we're bringing into this world, and we have a right to explore terminology and identities that make sense for us, that help us get even closer to who we are. Like moving even from the prodigal son journey language to deconstruction, and then finding my family and being like, oh my god, there's so many other people using this terminology. It made me feel like I had a home again, that I was safe in this space. And the same thing with non-binary. Like, to me, I'm like, you know what? I believe life is just a journey, and we all have agreed to go on this wild adventure together, and we are just exploring. And as you learn more, you look at it, you explore it, you get curious about it. You don't dig your heels in and say no. And in this way, I was like, if we're all getting closer to divinity, then doesn't this just mean that when my non-binary people are calling themselves that they are just even closer to understanding their own divinity, that they are not beholden to these scripts that you're given? And it is limiting. If you're a girl, then what does that mean? You can't play a certain like role in the Star Wars game. That's stupid. Why not? Like,
guys.
and why does your leader have to be a male? It's again because of these gender scripts. So anyway, it's like I don't see myself calling myself non-binary. Who knows? Life is long. I have no idea. But it suddenly became beautiful. I was like, oh, I get it. This is just our rejection, their rejection of these scripts. Also, I found it offensive for a bit because I felt, as a really like hardworking woman that's always like taking care of myself and paid all of my own bills. I was like, well, when someone wants to be quote unquote non-binary, aren't they just saying that women are weak? Like, oh, I don't want to be a woman. I don't want to identify with that because I want to be stronger. So I just had to wrestle with all of that and just expand and learn and wake up and get excited about the way that people are seeing divinity, and the way people are seeing that divinity manifesting in themselves and in their own lives.
I love that. Get curious, let go of scripts, and then be willing to move, however that is. And then be willing to move again, because you
Yeah.
never arrive, guys. That's the hard part.
Yeah, I could look back on a bunch of things and be like, "Woo, I was wrong," but I'm prepared and down to admit that if and when the time comes. And you're allowed to be wrong. You're allowed to go on this adventure. And that whole thing about like, why do bad things happen to good people? I don't believe that anymore, because if you see life as a grand adventure, I think you start noticing how you do invite some toxic things into your life sometimes. Like, I've had abusive boyfriends. It is not my fault, quote unquote, but it's like you are on an adventure. You are excavating your own heart and your own upbringing and your own past, and sometimes that manifests in some dark ways, and that's okay too. Like, those are all invitations. We have invitations to shame, pain, and fear. We can wallow in those. We could build a structured religion off of those three things. But we also have an invitation to love and exploration and divine acceptance of yourself and other people. And I'd much rather choose the latter path.
I love it. Well, Brenda, where can people find your work? How can they get your book? Tell us all the good things.
Yeah, so my book is called On Her Knees, Intentional Double Entendre. It's
Love
definitely
See what
it.
you did there.
Yes.
See what you did there.
yes, it's very sex, drugs, rock and roll, and Jesus.
My life's motto.
There you go. It's on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. It's available for pre-order. Kevin Garcia wrote a beautiful endorsement for me, as well as Jamie Lee Finch and Pete Enns and all these other phenomenal people supporting it. So I'm so excited to share it with everybody. And then, of course, my YouTube is weekly. That is God is Gray, Grey on YouTube, Instagram at God is Gray. And that's it.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing with us. Thank you so much for, just being here, for enduring our terrible winter here in California. Struggle together. It has been wonderful. Josie, how can people get in touch with us? What are ways that they can follow along on our Making Spaces journey?
Well, first of all, Sarah, they can find us at makingspacespodcast.com, where you'll find everything, but you can also find us on Instagram, Making Spaces Podcast. You can find us at our feed is anchor.fm/makingspaces, patreon.com/makingspacespodcast. Give us your money and we'll give you stuff in return. Other than that, you can find Sarah at Rev Sarah Heath on Instagram and me at Josie Takes the World. That's it. Find us, please.
You know I make you do that because I'm old and I can't remember things, right?
I feel like I forgot something, but it's fine. We'll figure it out.
You did great. Well, thanks again for joining us. We'll talk to you next week where we will be
saving a space for you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
I'm going to